actually, David was the first person in TK that I met in 1988 in Long Beach.
That's correct.
In those days, TK's office was in Long Beach, and the technical office was in Tokyo. Bizarrely, you might think, but that's how the organisation was set up. And we had something like 4 ships, and the new builds were just coming out of Korea, and then Torben Karlshoy was there at the time, the founder. And we had this aggressive growth program, taking in 12 ships a year, 12 ships plus. And another snag was we didn't have any people. And the 2 of us worked at that time and actually managed to man up this whole fleet during that whole period. By 1992, we had 60 ships. So I think that's one first key achievement that David had driven at that time. And then, just before the end of that, but November 91, we moved to Vancouver. And you moved into, almost instantly, to... Yeah. In fact, we couldn't see you for dust when you moved. He was gone. And as you said, that was probably one of the key learning curves that you had at that time. So everything was going great, 60 ships, all going well. And then, less than a year later, there was the oil slump in 92. We had the Nagasaki Spirit being hit by in a collision with a container ship. We lost everybody on board, bar 2 people, and the founder died. So I mention this because it was devastating for the organisation at the time, but it was also, I would say, character building in the extreme. And they say that the legacy that Torben left behind was the people that he left in the organisation to run it. And people like David and Bjorn and Jim Hood, I have to say, who really, to use a cliche, navigated the company through those times. I don't know exactly what the figure was, but we used to say it was down to like its last million, or even if it was 10 million, it was not enough for a large company at that time.
We had to borrow $3 million to get us over our next payments.
Next payday. So that's how close TK came to going out of business. Otherwise, you wouldn't see TK that you have today. So the third phase of that would be when Bjorn took over, and then I remember working with you as part of the strategy team. You must have been VP of Marine and Commercial, I think, at that time.
Yeah.
So I was relying a lot on David to guide me through it. I was MD of Glasgow by that time, about 97 or so. And we started these new strategies. And although we take it all for granted, I just can't resist saying that when you're part of a group that's then saying, we're going to go in, our goal is to have preeminence in 3 other markets, and we only had tankers and Aframax at that. And we need to be a bigger company because it's going to be bigger customers, and I had no clue what I was talking about. It was all going over my head. But David was able to advise me and navigate me through that. But then about a year later, when you see things like BP Amoco merger, then there was Exxon Mobil that hadn't even happened at that time. There was then Total, Fina, Elf, and then Chevron, Texaco. I thought, that's a bunch of geniuses I'm working with here. You know, they could see all this happening. And David was certainly at the forefront of that. And something you might not know is, when we started to make the acquisitions, like Bona in Norway, David went over to be the MD of Norway as we transitioned our way through that whole process. Because Bona was a company at that time 2/3 the size of TK, so it was a huge undertaking. And then when David spearheaded the JV with BHP, and then we made that into Australia, being a much larger organisation. We down there and headed up Australia for a while. Well, we transitioned Melbourne into these are just things where David was putting himself out there for the organisation, taking on these tasks, and moving away from Vancouver and setting these things up in other parts of the world. So, and then of course, I think by that time you'd then become VP or senior VP of customer relations and marine projects. So you're doing the 3C program, caring for customers and colleagues, which some of you might remember. But what that was doing was making sure we're all aligned in values throughout the organisation. And I think that's where David's communication skills and engagement skills come into their own doing that type of thing. And then the final phase, as you all know then, when we have the daughter companies, when we have TK Gas Services and Peter's, and these were all Peter's financial strategies, of course, but then when it comes into things like, which I think was the most significant game changer of all of them, the organisation by business, and setting up the full P&L for the business units, and David as the president of Gas. And already by that time you set it on its way, because the thing worth mentioning is one of the triggers for us getting into gas was people at ExxonMobil saying to you, well, you've got an excellent history in tankers, why don't you try and use that in gas? And then, of course, that got more traction when we bought Tapias and we got the Rasgas 2 and 3 and Tangguh and all of that. And the rest is then history. The golden age of gas, and now TK enjoys this preeminent position, or a global position as a market leader in gas with David at the helm. So I would just like to say that I do believe that it's an overused cliche, end of an era, but I think it is the end of an era with someone like David. I think that there's no one else in the SLT who has a seagoing background, having served at sea with BP and been a master on a TK ship, and then going all the way through to being in senior management ashore, and I think that's quite unique in itself. And for me personally, as well as we've rightly highlighted the role in gas, I think that there's very few people that I feel in TK today represent all parts and all aspects of TK. It's a true spirit of one TK. And for me, that's encapsulated in David, and I think that's something that will also be an end of an era when there's no one else that would have that profile when David retires. So I think it's fair to say that TK has been a significant part of your life, but I think it also must be said that your contribution has been significant to TK's success. So we wish you all the best, David.